Welcome back everybody, Mudford here. We're out in the shop again working on the 99 Buick Regal GS. Some parts for it just arrived today. We just got a set of stainless steel Speed Daddy headers from eBay. They seem pretty good. The welds on them don't look too bad. They seem pretty heavy. I know they're not quite as good as the ZZP ones. These are only 1.5 inches as opposed to 1 3/4 primaries, but I don't think that'll be an issue for us. We're not planning on going that high horsepower where it'll make a difference. The big saver with this is the downpipe. It takes out that bend. I'll show you the bend when I take that piece out. It's where the oxygen sensor fits in. They have the oxygen sensor going straight up, so they have to make a big bend in the pipe to make a spot for that. With the Speed Daddy downpipe, it exits off the side, which gives you much more clearance and you don't have to have that big kink in the pipe. So that'll increase the performance quite a bit right there. This O2 sensor is not important anyway. This is the one that's downstream of the cat, if you have one, which we're not going to have. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take some stuff out of the way here on the top where we can get to things a little bit better. Probably going to go ahead and pull the throttle body off, the intake pipe here, and the top engine mounts here, and get stuff right out of the way so when we do pull this we'll be able to get them up out of the way here, because they're going to have to come out. At least this one is going to want to come out up. We'll see on the other one, it probably will also. So we're just going to get started. I have no idea what I don't know right now, so I'm just going to tear into it and see how we end up. Just pulling out the 3 bolts on the throttle body. They're 10 millimeters. There's 2 underneath and the one right up on the top there. I just went ahead and disconnected the wiring on it already right here, as you can see. So I just left the throttle cable, the cruise cable, right on there and just flipped it up over out of the way, and then now we have pretty good access to the crossover pipe and we can get to the bolts and nuts quite a bit easier with that out of the way. So that's probably the first thing we're going to do now is get this crossover pipe out. That's not too bad. Now we're going to go for the ones on the front. Crossover pipe is out. I took the dog bone out on the driver's side so I could get the wiring harness to move more, so I could feed things out. And you can see I already got that heat shield off and the lifting lug that was back here for lifting the engine up. Now you can see where all the nuts and bolts are that hold the front manifold on. I got the nut off holding the dipstick tube also. So I'm just going to take my 13 millimeter now and hopefully buzz all these out and get the front manifold. I did end up pulling the dipstick tube out. It was relatively easy. Just kept twisting it back and forth and then it pulled right out of the block. Got all the studs out from the manifold and the nuts on each end. Those studs actually stay in the block, so now we're going to try sliding this off, and we'll see. Whoop! And it's off. Now we're just going to try to wiggle it out of here without breaking anything. And it's out. So this is your limiter on this. Got all three of these cylinders going into that small of a pipe right there. So it's going to help a lot with the front header anyway. Okay, I was just fitting the front header on. We've already ran into our first fitment issue with these headers. You can see right there, they're pretty close to that fan motor. I had to take that off. That was a heat shield for it. So it does look like there's sufficient clearance. Hopefully it doesn't get too hot. We can disconnect the downpipe and remove it from underneath, but everything else with the rear header we're going to have to do from up top. So I think the first thing we're going to do is get the strut tower brace off to give us some more room. The bolts where the exhaust pipe hooks up to the exhaust manifold, they're just on there too good. So I think I'm just going to take them off with a torch. Then I'm going to go underneath and cut the two bolts off right here, just past the catalytic converter where it hooks to the cat back part of the system. They're just too rusted. Okay, this is the main performance robbing part of the pipe. It bolts up to the manifolds. Here's the converter. You can see it's halfway decent size right there. And then just look at this. So you're making the flow go down like that. You're restricting it a ton right there. You can see this is just not a good idea. And it's just because they wanted to put their oxygen sensor straight up and down and there's not room. So it's just crazy to do that. This is supposed to be, you know, a performance. It's got a supercharger on it, and then you bottle up the exhaust like that. Kind of crazy. Is to put a full 3-inch exhaust on this. We'll probably put this on temporarily right now. Okay, I got the rear manifold out. It was really tricky. It's easier to take this out after you take the dipstick tube out that's down there. There's a bolt way down below the manifold. So you're going to want to take that out first. And it's easier, I would guess, if you have the special 7/8 socket for taking the oxygen sensor out. I didn't have it. It was a real pain. I got the whole manifold off, mostly using ratcheting wrenches, and I got it off, and then I tried to fit it out, and I couldn't fit it out with the O2 sensor on. So it was really tough getting that out with the manifold loose, because it would move all around on me. So try to take this oxygen sensor out before you take the manifold loose. And then the other key thing is just the bolt for the EGR. You're going to want to take the transmission dipstick tube loose and take it out first, and then it's a little easier to get to. But we got everything out now. This is considerably bigger than the manifold, but we'll give it a try here and see what happens. Probably would have saved me a little bit of trouble earlier. You can take the motor mount on the driver's side out and then take the one on the passenger side loose, rock the engine back. I put a pry bar down here and pulled the engine forward and then refastened it sort of through here, and this tips the motor up away from the firewall. Now I bet you I'll have a little bit better luck getting this header in. The Speed Daddy header is a tight fit. You can see I've got the ratchet strap holding the motor jammed right up against the fan, and I finally did had the header right here tapping on it, and I did get it to drop down in. Now hopefully it'll pull back up to where it needs to be. We're just going to try to pull that header up and slip this gasket in. It's a little bit tricky. I should say a lot tricky, wrestling around getting them to fit in and getting that crossover pipe to fit, because you can see it's really close to the there's not a lot of clearance with the brake booster, so it takes a lot of work to get it in. I've made a little bit of progress. I've got the front O2 sensor in on the manifold. I'll show you that in a second, but let's just be honest about that. It does not fit very well. I did have to use a hammer and bend the firewall in a little bit to make room for it. Now I'm struggling with the dipstick tube for the transmission. I can get it started, but it's at the wrong angle and the bracket is hitting the header. So that's a little rough, but I've got everything else in. I'll show you that underneath. I don't have the rear oxygen sensor in. It really wouldn't budge without putting some heat to the exhaust pipe right there. And you can see it wasn't really good for the threads on this. But it wasn't going to come out without the heat. I mean, I was trying and was starting to strip it. It just did not want to cooperate. So at least we gave it a try. But there aren't really enough threads left to do anything with it. So I'm going to have to go to the parts store and get a new rear oxygen sensor. So for the most part, things went pretty good under here on this part of it. The V-band clamp went on easily. Clamped the other two sections together. Put my bolts through the flange. Got my rubber hangers on. That was relatively easy. Probably the easiest part of the job so far. Okay, you can see how tight the oxygen sensor is to the firewall, and you can probably see where I pounded the firewall in. That's about as good as I could do with it. Probably could have got it a little more in, but that should work there. Now, what we're dealing with, the transmission tube, the bracket for it is hitting part of the header. So I can't get it to turn the right angle to get the bracket in. So that's what I'm fighting right now. So I'm just going to continue fighting that, and hopefully I'll figure it out and have something to tell you on how to make it easier for you. So I took the crossover pipe back off. This should show you why I was having trouble getting the dipstick tube back in. I put the dipstick tube in, and look where it's at. It's right where the crossover pipe has to go. So it appears now we have to do some bending and get the dipstick tube moved over a little bit right there. I know that's going to be a lot easier said than done, but that's the only way this exhaust system is going to work. Okay, obviously I don't have everything tightened up perfect yet, but I did get the tube bent. I just kept prying on it and pushing on it and got it over to the side here. And now I got the crossover pipe in most of the way. Still have to get the front header tightened back up in place and get this pushed back down all the way on and reclamped, and get the rear in tight and get it clamped, but at least it's kind of where I want it and it should work. They're looking pretty good now. I'm just hooking up the EGR. Just got a bunch of little things to do and we'll be ready to fire it up hopefully within an hour. Here's one more issue that I found. The oxygen sensor used to be right up here on the manifold, and now it's way down there, and the wires weren't long enough. So what I've done is I've cut them, added to the harness, and I was even able to find matching colors. So I just got to put some heat shrink connectors on and get these back together. Okay, I think we got everything back together. It was a little tricky getting the dipstick tube. I think it was like 3 in the morning when I was working on it, so I was getting a little tired. Find it from the bottom where it goes through the block at, and was able to get the dipstick tube back in. And we're all set to go now. I just want to reiterate the biggest problems with putting these Speed Daddy headers on your Buick Regal. It's going to be a little tricky getting the back header down in. You're going to want to take the front engine mounts off and get the engine as far forward as you can and get it to slip in. Then you're going to have a problem with your front oxygen sensor. It's going to hit the firewall. You're going to have to do a little pounding on the firewall with a hammer or with something to get it bent out of the way a little bit. Then your oxygen sensor wire will be too short, so you just need to extend that a little bit. And then your transmission dipstick tube will be in the way of your crossover pipe. So the best thing to do is to get the rear manifold on, get the dipstick tube in place, and then fit the crossover pipe in, and then slip the front manifold on. Those are the biggest things that you're gonna have problems with. So hopefully this helps you out and cuts your time down. This is actually my 4th partial day working on it. I didn't get a lot of time every day to work on it, a few hours here and there, but it is rather time consuming because there's a lot of stuff you got to take off, and it is quite a bit of work. But I paid $189 for these headers. I was told the ZZP headers. I was told that the ZZP headers will fit much easier, but they are priced at, I believe, $8.99. So huge difference. And now we're gonna go ahead. I've already ordered the ZZP cold air intake. Don't tell my wife that, but I already got that ordered because I had to replace my rear oxygen sensor, and I don't have a cat, so I wanted to put one of the extenders on and get it out of the stream so it would read a little different to trick the computer. So I ordered all that from ZZP. So that'll be coming up in a later project. I think I'm just going to take it to the muffler shop and get the complete 3-inch from what I've put on back. So those are going to be the major mods we're going to have for racing it this summer. The full stainless headers, downpipe, full 3-inch exhaust, and cold air intake. I think that's going to be it. Now I'm going to go ahead and start it, and we'll see what it sounds like. No major exhaust leaks. I'm going to go ahead and take it for a drive and see what it feels like.